So in Texas, money gets divided in a just and right division. Now, what does that mean? Some people think it means a 50-50 split. Not necessarily. Often, the split is 50-50 or close, but it can be a different percentage split based on a number of factors. One of which is, does one spouse work? Does one spouse stay at home? Was there bad behavior during the marriage? Did one spouse waste a lot of community assets? Were they cruel to the other person? The courts will look at what your earning capacity would be down the line. So there's a lot of factors that go into determining what a just and right division is, but just know it's not always 50-50. When we are deciding how to split a marital estate, the first thing that we do is gather all of the information about the entire marital estate. So all of the information: what's the value of the house? Is there a mortgage on the house? What's the value of the retirement, if there is any? What kind of cash is in the bank? What kind of vehicles you may have? Any other property or other vehicles. Sometimes people have gold and silver, even down to things like frequent flyer miles. If there's a lot of them, a lot of things have value, and we're going to value everything in the community estate, and then also take a look at the liabilities and come up with a number at the bottom that everyone agrees, well, this is what our community estate looks like. At that point, then we're going to try to get to a equitable split, a just and right division, and whatever we decide that division should be, then we look at the individual assets and figure out who needs what, who wants what, and how can we make that equitable division come to pass. So we've got one house. We can't split that house. You don't both want to live in the house together. So either one person's going to get the house, or we're going to sell the house and split the assets. But if we give one person the house, then we've got to give some equal value on the other side. So maybe the other person gets the retirement or gets other assets that equal out. So if we're going for a 50-50 split, we're going to have that 50-50 split on the bottom of the spreadsheet, and we're going to assign assets to make up that division. In Texas, the court will divide your marital estate. Now, marital assets are everything that was accumulated during the marriage, every bit of income that came in the marriage from either source, from either party, from any source. So that could be interest on assets, on financial assets. It could be the growth in value of real estate, anything that came into the marriage, anything you purchased, anything you acquired. All of that is community assets. Now, some people will talk about separate assets, and those are things that were accumulated before marriage. So if you had a car before you got married, and say you're getting divorced a few years later and you still own that car is your separate property, and it doesn't get divided in your divorce. Also, things like inheritance or other gifts from friends or family members, personal injury settlements are separate property if it involved pain and suffering to you. That's your pain and suffering. That's your award. So all of those things are your separate property. They do not get divided in your Texas divorce. Separate property can be protected by either a prenup or a postnup. Either one of those agreements will identify what your separate property is, so that if you do get divorced down the line, nobody can argue about what was separate property when you made that agreement. In Texas, when we split a marital estate, the idea is to make a just and right division. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into what a just and right division is. And in many cases, if we're just not getting along anymore and there's been no bad behavior, there's not anything crazy going on, then that split is likely going to be pretty close to 50-50. But in certain situations, there may be more given to one spouse because of either bad behavior, say that one spouse was cruel to that other spouse, if that spouse is disabled or there was some family violence. If one spouse is working and the other spouse is not working and hasn't worked for some time and may have a difficulty getting a job, then you may see a swing of those assets. And now maybe you might be looking at 55-45, maybe as much as 60-40. Generally, you're not going to see huge swings unless there's some really bad stuff going on. Some examples of reasons why you might get more in your divorce. If your spouse has cheated and spent a lot of money on the person they were cheating with, either they rented an apartment or they were taking them on expensive trips, bought them expensive jewelry, those things a court hates to see. That's stealing from the marital estate. And that spouse who did those things will be punished in a way that the non-cheating spouse is going to be reimbursed essentially for their spouse's cheating. Now, the fact that one spouse cheated in and of itself is not a reason to sway that division very much. But if your spouse was spending money on their girlfriend or boyfriend, that is a reason why you might get a disproportionate split. When you're going through a divorce in Texas, you're going to look at all of the assets that have come into the marriage of every type. So some of the typical types of assets that people have are real estate, the house you live in. If you have a secondary home like a beach house or a lake house, that's going to be divided. Other things that get divided are timeshares that you've owned together during the marriage, things like bank accounts, investment accounts, 401ks, other retirement such as IRAs, pensions also get divided. One thing that a lot of people forget about dividing in divorce or don't realize that it's something that can be divided is a future bonus. So if your spouse works for a company that is going to receive a bonus in the next year for work that was done in the current year, you can say, I get a percentage of that bonus because that was income that was earned during the marriage. Other types of assets that get divided in divorce are stocks. If you hold stock that you own currently, those stocks can be divided in kind usually, so that the stock itself is not sold. You just get 50 shares of Apple stock and he gets 50 shares of Apple stock. We divide it in kind. Now, sometimes if your spouse works for instance, an oil and gas company or a tech company where they receive incentive compensation for their job, such as restricted stock units, those are payable in the future. They may not own that stock yet, but it's a right to receive stock in the future. And that benefit is also divisible in divorce. So make sure that your lawyer understands how to value and split restricted stock units. Other assets that people will divide in divorce are what we call use assets. So your car, your golf cart if you have one, a boat, motorcycles, anything that you use that may have a title attached to it, all of those things are going to be valued and divided in divorce. Some people will have gold or silver. There's a lot of alternative investments these days where people are investing in things other than the stock market. And so all of those things, they have a value that can be divided and distributed. Another common investment that we see in divorce these days is cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency can be hard to value, but there are experts that can be utilized to value that currency. A lot of times you don't realize how much is in it. It may be worth a lot more than you think it is. And so if there's cryptocurrency, if you know your spouse has Bitcoin or other forms of cryptocurrency, you want to make sure that you've hired a lawyer that understands those types of assets, those types of investments, and can work with an expert to divide them so that you get your fair share. You may be being told that the retirement is your spouse's because it was in their name, they earned that money, or the house is in their name's on the title, so it's their house. In Texas, Everything that was earned during the marriage or bought during the marriage, regardless of whose name is on the title, is community property and can't be divided. So if you're being told that, know that it's not true. Make sure that you've talked to a lawyer that understands this and can help you get your fair share of the community assets. If you have any questions, please give us a call at DeFord Law Firm.